The hunting party found the cave at twilight, when the frozen wastes turned from white to violet and the wind screamed like dying wolves. Riker didn't want to enter. Something about the darkness felt wrong, felt aware, but the ice drake's tracks led directly inside. His beta lit a torch. The cavern exhaled cold that burned their lungs. And there, in the heart of the cave, suspended in glacial ice so clear it looked like captured starlight, was a woman. She crouched in a protective ball, white hair flowing around her like frozen silk, arms wrapped tight around something precious. Her skin was ghost pale, her features delicate and ethereal. Beautiful, heartbreaking. Riker's knees buckled. Lumi. 5 years. 5 years since he'd banished his Albino Omega mate to these killing fields. She should be bones scattered across the tundra. Instead, she looked like she'd fallen asleep moments ago, preserved perfectly in ice. His hand touched the frozen surface before he could stop himself. Alpha heat radiated from his palm. The ice cracked. Her arms shifted slightly, and he saw what she'd been protecting all this time. A child, small, dark-haired, breathing. Alive. The frozen wastes had claimed 17 of Riker's warriors over the years. Good men, strong wolves, reduced to ice sculptures that the spring thaw never reached because spring never came to this cursed tundra. The northern territories ended where the pine forests gave way to endless white, where the wind carried voices of the dead, where nothing, absolutely nothing, survived. Yet the ice drake had survived, had thrived, even growing fat on stolen livestock and the occasional foolish hunter. The creature had taken 3 children from the border villages in the last month. The pack demanded their alpha's response. So Riker had assembled his best warriors and pushed north into the land of ghosts. They'd been tracking for 2 days when his beta Marcus stopped abruptly. "Alpha, do you feel that?" Riker did, a hum beneath his skin like standing too close to lightning. Magic, old and strange, pulsing from somewhere ahead. The cave mouth appeared through the snow like a wound in the world, dark, jagged, exhaling cold that burned worse than fire. The drake's tracks led directly inside, but the magical signature was all wrong. Ice drakes were creatures of instinct, not magic. Could be a trap, Marcus warned. Riker's wolf stirred uneasily beneath his skin. Every instinct screamed to turn back. But the children's faces haunted him, small, terrified, torn from their mother's arms. Light torches, stay close. The cavern swallowed them whole. Their footsteps echoed wrong, as if the ice were listening. The magical energy intensified with every step, raising the hair on Riker's neck. Frost formed on their furs despite the torchlight. The temperature dropped so severely that breathing became painful. Then Marcus raised his torch higher, and the cavern opened into a cathedral of ice. Columns of frozen water stretched from floor to ceiling like the ribs of some massive beast. Icicles hung like chandeliers, refracting torchlight into prismatic rainbows. And in the center, catching the light and throwing it back in shattered fragments, was a pillar of glacial ice so perfectly clear it looked like captured glass. Inside that ice, perfectly preserved, was a woman. Riker's heart stopped. She was crouched in a protective ball, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around her chest, back curved against some invisible wind. Her hair, white as fresh snow, flowed around her in frozen waves, each strand individually preserved. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with that ethereal quality that had made the pack whisper ghost wolf and death omen. Her eyes were closed. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she'd been caught mid-breath. She wore the same simple dress she'd worn that night, the night Riker had sentenced her to death. "By the moon," Marcus breathed. "Alpha is that." "Lumi." The name tore from Riker's throat like broken glass. It couldn't be. 5 years. 5 years since he'd banished his mate to the frozen wastes. 5 years since he'd watched her stumble into the snow, one hand on her belly, refusing to beg. She should be bones, should be dust, should be forgotten. But there she was, looking exactly as she had that terrible night. Young, fragile, beautiful in a way that had terrified him because beauty like that didn't belong to warriors, didn't belong in a pack that valued strength above all else. She should be dead, one of the warriors whispered. Riker moved without thinking. His legs carried him forward until he stood inches from the ice, his breath fogging against the frozen surface. Up close, he could see the details, the delicate arch of her eyebrows, the sweep of her lashes against her cheeks, the faint blue tint to her lips. The mate bond, which he'd tried so hard to sever, to ignore, to bury beneath 5 years of bitterness and regret, roared to life in his chest. It had never truly gone quiet. It had screamed at him every day since she'd left, a constant ache that he'd told himself was relief, was freedom from a cursed bond. He'd been lying to himself. His hand touched the ice before he could stop himself. Alpha heat, the supernatural warmth that all-powerful alphas carried, radiated from his palm. The surface began to melt immediately, water trickling down like tears. The ice cracked. A sound like breaking bones echoed through the cavern. Alpha, wait, Marcus started forward. But Riker couldn't stop. The mate bond was howling now, desperate and agonized, screaming that she was here. She was close, after 5 years of believing she was gone forever. The outer layer of ice sheared away in sheets. Riker's claws extended involuntarily, carefully, precisely, carving away the frozen prison. His heart hammered so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Her face emerged first, still pale, still perfect, still not breathing. Then her shoulders, her arms, wrapped so tightly around her chest that it took him a moment to realize what he was seeing. She wasn't holding herself. She was holding something else. Riker's hands moved faster now, frantic, careless of his own safety. More ice fell away. The bundle in her arms became visible, fabric, carefully wrapped, protected by her body, shielded by her back against the killing cold. The fabric shifted. Riker froze. Alpha, Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. The bundle moved again. A small hand emerged from the wrapping, a child's hand no bigger than a bird. Pink, warm, alive. The cavern tilted. Riker's vision narrowed to that impossible hand, those tiny fingers flexing in the sudden warmth of the torchlight. Get her out, Riker heard himself say. His voice didn't sound like his own. Get them both out, now. His warriors surged forward, using controlled alpha heat to melt the remaining ice. Water pooled at their feet. Steam rose in ghostly wisps, and slowly, carefully, Lumi's frozen form came free. She collapsed forward. Riker caught her, and the cold of her body burned worse than fire. She was stiff, rigid, frozen solid except the bundle in her arms was warm. With shaking hands, Riker pulled back the fabric. A small face looked up at him, blinking in the sudden light. A child, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with dark hair and delicate features and eyes. Moon above. Golden eyes, Riker's eyes. The child stared at him with curious recognition, head tilting slightly. Then those golden eyes drifted back to Lumi's frozen face, and the boy's expression melted into something ancient and sad. Mama's sleeping again, the child said, his voice raspy from disuse but clear. She does that, gets cold so I stay warm. The cavern spun. Riker looked down at Lumi, at her protective crouch, her body curved around the child like a shield, her back taking the brunt of the wind and cold. 5 years in the frozen wastes. 5 years of impossible survival. She'd done it. Somehow, impossibly, his cursed ghost wolf mate had kept their child alive in the land where nothing lived. And Riker had sent them here to die. The child blinked up at Riker with those impossible golden eyes, eyes that Riker saw every morning in his own reflection, eyes that marked the royal bloodline of the Northern Territories going back 7 generations. There was no mistaking what this meant. How is this possible? Marcus breathed, stepping closer. The other warriors formed a semicircle around them, torches casting dancing shadows across the ice. Alpha, that child, he should be. Dead, Riker finished hoarsely. They should both be dead. But the boy was very much alive. He squirmed in Riker's arms, surprisingly strong, pushing against the Alpha's chest with small hands. His skin was warm, his cheeks flushed with healthy color. He looked well-fed even though there was nothing to eat in the frozen wastes but ice and death. "Put me down," the boy said. His voice carried an unusual cadence, as if he'd learned to speak from only one person and had perfected her inflections. "I need to check Mama." Riker lowered him to the ground, and the child immediately scrambled to where Marcus was laying Lumi's still frozen body on a bed of furs. The warriors had wrapped her carefully, but she remained stiff and cold, her face peaceful but lifeless. The boy pressed his small hands to her cheek with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "She's very cold today," he announced matter-of-factly. "It must have been a hard night. She gets coldest when she keeps me warmest." "What's your name?" Riker managed, his voice rough. The boy didn't look up from Lumi's face. "Pax. Mama says it means peace. She wanted me to be peace because the world was loud and angry when I was born." He traced patterns on Lumi's frozen cheek, symbols Riker didn't recognize. "She tells me stories when I sleep, about stars and wolves and a pack that lives where trees grow tall." Marcus moved to stand beside Riker, his voice low. "Alpha, look at him. The eyes, the bone structure, even the way he moves." "I know what he is," Riker snapped. Then, softer, because it wasn't Marcus's fault that the world had just shattered and reformed into something unrecognizable. "I know." Pax finally looked up at the gathered warriors, his expression curious but unafraid. He studied each face carefully, lingering longest on Riker. Those golden eyes, so like his own yet somehow softer, gentler, traced over Riker's features with an intensity that felt ancient. "You're very big," Pax observed. "Bigger than Mama said. She said you were big like mountains, but I thought mountains were just ice that grew tall." He tilted his head. "Are you my papa?" The cavern fell silent except for the drip of melting ice and the distant howl of wind. Every warrior turned to look at Riker. The question hung in the frozen air like a blade. Riker's throat closed. He wanted to deny it, wanted to demand proof, wanted to rage against the impossible. But those eyes, those damned golden eyes, stared up at him with a child's simple expectation of truth. "Yes," Riker heard himself say, I'm your father." He expected joy. Expected the child to run to him, to embrace him, to cry with relief at finally meeting the father he'd been waiting for. Instead, Pax's expression shuddered. Those golden eyes went cold, not with hate, but with something worse. Disappointment. The child took a careful step backward, positioning himself between Riker and Lumi's frozen form. "Mama said you didn't want me," Pax said quietly. Each word was precisely articulated, as if he'd rehearsed this speech in his head 1,000 times during the long, dark nights. "She said my papa was afraid. Afraid of what I would be, afraid of what people would say. She said that's why we had to leave." A warrior behind Riker inhaled sharply. Marcus's hand found Riker's shoulder, gripping tight. Whether in support or to hold him upright, Riker couldn't tell. "She cried," Pax continued, his small voice carrying clearly through the cavern. "The first night when the cold came and we couldn't find shelter. She held me and cried and said she was sorry. Sorry that my papa didn't want us. Sorry that she wasn't strong enough. Sorry that I would never know what it was like to have a family." Each word was a knife between Riker's ribs, precisely placed, cutting deep. "But then she stopped crying," Pax said. His chin lifted with a pride that was pure Lumi, that quiet, unshakable strength that Riker had mistaken for weakness. "She said we didn't need anyone who didn't want us. She said we would make our own family, just her and me, and we did." The boy's hand found Lumi's frozen one, his small fingers wrapping around hers. "Mama keeps me warm. She teaches me about stars and ice and how to listen to the wind. She sings to me. She tells me I'm brave and strong and wanted." Those golden eyes fixed on Riker with devastating clarity. "She says you were wrong about us, about both of us." Riker dropped to his knees. The ice bit through his furs, but he barely felt it. He was eye level with his son now. His son, this impossible child who'd survived 5 years in hell because his mother had been strong enough to do what Riker had been too coward to attempt. "She was right," Riker whispered, his voice cracked. I was wrong about everything. Pax studied him for a long moment. Then, with the brutal honesty only children possess, Mama says sorry is just a word. She says what matters is what you do after. Behind them, Marcus cleared his throat roughly. Alpha, we need to move. The temperature's dropping fast, and the lady, she needs help we can't provide here. Riker nodded numbly. He reached for Lumi's frozen form, but Pax's small hand shot out, gripping his wrist with surprising strength. You'll be careful with her, the boy demanded. She's very fragile when she's sleeping. If she gets too warm too fast, it hurts her. I know, I've watched. I'll be careful, Riker promised. Then, because the words were tearing out of him, I swear to you, Pax, I will never hurt her again. Pax's expression didn't soften, but he nodded once and stepped aside. As Riker gathered Lumi's frozen body into his arms, so light, too light, as if the years had burned away everything except her essence, Pax reached up to pat her cheek one more time. Don't worry, Mama, the boy whispered. I'll make sure he keeps his promise this time. And Riker, Alpha of the Northern Territories, felt his heart break cleanly in two. The journey back to the Northern Territories took 2 days that felt like 2 years. Riker carried Lumi's frozen body himself, refusing to let anyone else touch her. She remained rigid in his arms, her skin pale as death, frost crystallizing on her eyelashes. But she wasn't getting colder. If anything, there was the faintest warmth emanating from her chest, a ember struggling against an ocean of ice. Pax walked beside them, never straying more than arm's reach from his mother. He didn't complain about the pace, didn't ask to be carried, didn't show any sign of the exhaustion that should have overwhelmed a 5-year-old child. When they stopped to rest, he would press his small hands to Lumi's face and whisper things Riker couldn't hear. Reassurances, promises, songs in a language that sounded like wind through ice. He's stronger than he should be, Marcus observed on the second night, watching Pax help arrange furs around Lumi's body with meticulous care. No normal child could survive what he's survived. He's not normal, Riker said quietly. Look at his eyes when the moonlight hits them. Marcus looked. Pax's golden eyes flickered with something else, a pale blue-white light that came and went like northern lights. Ghost wolf magic, manifesting in a child who shouldn't exist. Moon above, Marcus breathed. He's got both bloodlines, Alpha and Ghost Wolf. Which means the pack is going to lose their minds when we arrive. They reached the territory at dawn on the 3rd day. Word had spread ahead of them. Runners had been sent the moment they'd left the wastes, and half the pack waited at the gates. The crowd parted in shocked silence as Riker strode through, carrying his frozen mate, his impossible son walking at his side. The whispers started immediately. Ghost Wolf, cursed, he brought her back, there's a child. Riker ignored them all and headed straight for the healer's complex. Ilara, the pack's eldest healer, was already waiting. She took one look at Lumi and her weathered face went pale. Inside, now, clear the room, everyone except the Alpha and the child. The examination room was warm, almost stifling after days in the cold. Riker laid Lumi on the padded table as gently as he could. Her body had begun to thaw slightly during the journey, but she remained rigid, unresponsive. Pax climbed onto a stool beside her and took her hand, humming softly. Ilara worked in silence, her hands hovering over Lumi's body, eyes closed in concentration. Her magic, healer's magic, different from ghost wolf power but no less ancient, pulsed through the room in waves. Minutes stretched into an hour. Finally, she opened her eyes. Alpha, I need you to sit down. Tell me. Sit down. The command in her voice was absolute. Riker sat. Pax's humming stopped. Ilara's hands were shaking. This is ghost wolf stasis. I've only read about it in the oldest texts. It's a technique that died out centuries ago because it requires complete mastery of one's life force and a willingness to burn it away slowly over time. I don't understand, Riker said, though dread was already coiling in his stomach. She's keeping herself between life and death, Alpha. Her body is frozen, but her essence, her soul, her magic is still active. She's been using her own life force as fuel, burning herself like a candle to generate heat. to create a pocket of survivable temperature around the child. Alara gestured to Pax. For 5 years, she's been dying by degrees to keep him alive. The room tilted. How long does she have? Days, maybe a week if we're fortunate. She's almost consumed. There's barely anything left of her essence. When it runs out completely. Alara didn't finish. She didn't need to. There has to be something you can do. There is one way. The stasis can be reversed. Life force can be poured back into her to replenish what she's lost. But it requires an incredibly powerful source and a direct connection to her essence. Alara's eyes met his. It requires the mate bond. The mate bond. The bond Riker had rejected, had tried desperately to sever, had spent 5 years denying even as it screamed in his chest. I tried to break it, Riker said hoarsely. I went to the dark rituals, paid blood witches to cut it away. The mate bond cannot be broken, only suppressed, Alara said gently. It's still there, Alpha, buried, damaged, but intact. I can feel it from here, a thread between you and her, frayed but unbroken. Pax had gone very still on his stool. Those golden eyes, so much like Riker's own, fixed on him with devastating intensity. You tried to break the bond with Mama. Yes, Riker said. There was no point in lying. Why? Because I was a coward. Pax absorbed this with the seriousness of someone far older than 5. Then, can you save her? The question hung in the air. Alara waited. The room seemed to hold its breath. Riker looked at Lumi's frozen face. The mate he'd rejected, the woman who'd been stronger and braver than he could ever hope to be. She'd kept their son alive through 5 years of impossible cold. She'd sacrificed herself degree by degree, burning away her own existence to protect the child he'd refused to acknowledge. And now she was dying because of him. Yes, Riker said. The word came out firm, certain, even though terror clawed at his throat. Yes, I can save her. You understand what this means? Alara asked. To reverse the stasis, you'll need to open the mate bond fully. Not just acknowledge it, embrace it. Let it consume you the way it was always meant to. You'll be bound to her for life, Alpha, truly bound. No more suppression, no more denial. If she lives, she'll be your mate in every sense of the word. I understand. And if she rejects the bond when she wakes, if she refuses you, Alara's voice was soft but unyielding. The mate bond works both ways. You can offer your life force, but she has to accept it, if she chooses death over being bound to you again. Then I'll have to live with that, Riker said quietly. Pax slipped off his stool and walked to Riker. Up close, the child's resemblance to both parents was staggering. Riker's bone structure and eyes, Lumi's delicate features and ethereal quality. He reached up and put his small hand on Riker's chest, right over his heart. Mama told me about the mate bond, Pax said. She said it's like 2 stars tied together with invisible string. She said hers hurt all the time because the other star was trying to fly away. Those golden eyes searched Riker's face. Are you going to fly away again? No, Riker promised. He covered Pax's small hand with his own. Never again. You can really save her. This time, when Riker said yes, he meant it with every fiber of his being. Even if it killed him. Even if she woke up and hated him. Even if the pack revolted and he lost everything. None of it mattered, except bringing her back. Pax nodded slowly, then climbed back onto his stool. He took his mother's hand again and resumed his humming, a melody that sounded like wind singing through ice caves, beautiful and haunting. When do we start? Riker asked Alara. The old healer moved to a cabinet and began pulling out supplies. Herbs, crystals, ceremonial components Riker didn't recognize. Now, Alpha, we start now. Because if we wait even one more day, there won't be enough of her left to save. The bonding ritual would take 3 days to prepare. 3 days of gathering rare herbs, consecrating the ceremonial space, and allowing Riker's suppressed mate bond to slowly surface without shocking his system. 3 days during which Alara made it abundantly clear that Riker needed to stay away from the healing room so his unstable energy didn't interfere with Lumi's delicate stasis. Which meant 3 days alone with Pax. The child needs rest, food, and stability, Alara had said, as if those were simple things Riker knew how to provide. He didn't. The first disaster came within an hour. Riker led Pax to the Alpha's quarters, spacious rooms with a large bed, fireplace, and all the comforts befitting his rank. Pax stood in the doorway, staring at the closed door itself with visible confusion. "What's wrong?" Riker asked. "Why is there wood in the way?" That's a door. You open it to go through." Pax reached out tentatively, touching the wood with wonder. "Mama told me about doors. She said they keep the warm inside and the cold outside." He pushed it experimentally, watching it swing. "It moves." "You've never seen a door before." The cave didn't have doors, just the open mouth and the deep places where the wind couldn't reach. Pax walked into the room slowly, examining everything with the cautious curiosity of someone encountering an alien world. He touched the bed, the furs, the burning logs in the fireplace. When he reached the window, he pressed his face against the glass. "This keeps the cold out but lets the light in. Mama would have loved this." Riker's throat tightened. 5 years. 5 years this child had lived in a cave with no doors, no windows, no warmth except what his mother could generate by burning away her own life. "Are you hungry?" Riker asked, desperate to do something, anything useful. Pax nodded. The kitchens provided a feast: roasted meat, bread, vegetables, fruit preserves. Riker set it all on the low table by the fire. Pax approached the food like it might attack him. He picked up a piece of bread, sniffed it, took the smallest bite. His eyes went wide. "It's soft," he breathed, "and warm. Mama told me about warm bread, but I thought she was making up stories." He ate with the focused intensity of someone who'd survived on whatever meager supplies his mother could preserve with magic. When he reached the honey cakes, he made a sound of pure joy. "Good?" Riker asked. "Better than ice water. Better than dried meat that tastes like snow. Better than anything." Pax ate 3 honey cakes in rapid succession, then looked guilty. "Mama says I should save food for later, in case there's no more tomorrow." "There will always be more tomorrow," Riker said quietly. "I promise." Pax studied him with those unnerving golden eyes. "Mama says promises are expensive. You shouldn't make them unless you can pay." The second disaster came at nightfall. Riker showed Pax the large bed, piled with soft furs and down pillows. "You can sleep here. It's comfortable." Pax climbed onto the bed, bounced once experimentally, then immediately climbed back down and curled up on the floor beside it. "What are you doing?" "Sleeping. The ground is safer. If you're up high, you can fall. Mama always made sure I slept low where it's stable." "The bed won't let you fall. Look." Riker sat on it, demonstrating. "It's soft and safe." But Pax had already closed his eyes, his small body curled into a tight ball the way animals sleep in the wild. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out. Riker stared at his son, this impossible child who didn't know about doors or beds or safety, who'd spent his entire life learning to survive instead of learning to live. Slowly, carefully, he lifted Pax from the floor and placed him in the bed. The boy stirred but didn't wake. Then Riker sat in the chair by the fire and watched over him through the night, the way he should have been doing for 5 years. The third day brought more challenges. Pax was terrified of crowds. When pack members gathered in the corridors, he would press himself against walls, hyperventilating until Riker cleared the area. He spoke in strange, fragmented patterns, mixing observations about ice crystal formations with questions about whether stars were actually holes in the sky's fabric. He collected smooth stones and arranged them in complex patterns that made no sense to anyone but him. But slowly, Riker began to understand. When Pax asked about snowflake geometry, Riker took him outside and they examined patterns in fresh snow. When Pax became overwhelmed by noise, Riker found quiet spaces. When Pax mentioned that Mama used to sing a song about wolves running under moonlight, Riker sang the old Pax songs his own mother had taught him and watched wonder bloom on his son's face. "You know Mama's songs?" Pax asked, astonished. "They're everyone's songs. They're Pax songs. They belong to all of us." "Mama said we didn't have a pack. She said it was just us." "That was my fault," Riker said. But it's not true anymore. You have a pack now, you have me. Pax didn't respond, but he didn't pull away either. On the fourth day, Riker discovered that Pax had an uncanny ability to read tracks in the snow. They walked the territory borders, and Pax identified every animal that had passed: rabbit, deer, fox, even the distinctive pattern of an ice lynx that had been hunting nearby. "How do you know all this?" Riker asked, genuinely impressed. "Mama taught me. She said understanding tracks means understanding stories. Everything leaves a story in the snow." Pax crouched down, studying a particular set of prints. This rabbit was running from something. See how the back feet land ahead of the front feet? That's fear. That's survival. Later, when Riker shifted into his wolf form, massive, dark-furred, powerful, Pax didn't shrink back in fear. Instead, his eyes lit with the first real joy Riker had seen. "You're beautiful," Pax breathed, reaching out to touch the thick fur. "Mama told me about wolves, but seeing one is different. Can I?" Riker lowered himself to the ground. Pax clambered onto his back, small hands gripping his fur, and laughed when Riker stood. It was the first time Riker had heard his son truly laugh, not a polite smile, not a careful observation, but pure childish delight. They ran through the snow, Pax whooping with joy, and for a moment everything else fell away. There was no past, no regret, no dying mate in the healing room, just a father and son running under pale winter sunlight. That night, after another meal of honey cakes and stories, Pax climbed into Riker's lap while they sat by the fire. He didn't ask permission, didn't hesitate, just settled against Riker's chest like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Tell me about the pack," Pax said sleepily. "Tell me about all the wolves and the families and the songs." So Riker told him about pack runs under full moons, about the summer gathering where cubs learned to hunt, about the winter festival when everyone shared stories and food and warmth. Pax listened with drowsy attention, asking occasional questions, his small body growing heavier with approaching sleep. "Will Mama wake up in time for the winter festival?" Pax mumbled against Riker's shirt. "Yes," Riker promised. "She'll wake up, I swear it. And we'll all be together, you and Mama and me." Riker's arms tightened around his son. "Yes, all of us together." Pax made a small, contented sound and fell asleep. Riker sat there, holding the child he'd never wanted, the son he'd condemned to death before birth, and felt something break open in his chest. Not the mate bond, that was still slowly surfacing, still healing from years of suppression. This was something else, something fiercer and more terrifying than any bond. Love. He loved this strange, brilliant boy who spoke in poetry about ice and stars. This survivor who'd never known safety, but still offered trust. This child who should hate him, but instead fell asleep in his arms. For the first time, Riker understood what he'd destroyed 5 years ago. Not just a mate bond, not just his own chance at happiness, but this, the chance to watch his son grow from the beginning, to teach him about the world, to protect him and guide him and be there for every moment. He'd thrown away everything that mattered. And now, holding Pax while the fire crackled and snow fell outside, Riker made a silent vow. If the moon granted him the impossible, if Lumi survived, if she could ever forgive him, if they could somehow build something from these ruins, he would spend the rest of his life making sure his son never doubted again that he was wanted, loved, and home. The council chamber filled slowly that evening, warriors and advisors filing in with the grim expressions of people preparing for an execution. Word had spread through the territory like wildfire. The Alpha had returned from the frozen wastes with his banished mate and a bastard son. The ghost wolf lived. The cursed bloodline had produced an heir. The pack was not pleased. Riker stood at the head of the long table, Marcus at his right hand, and watched his council assemble. These were wolves he'd fought beside, bled with, trusted with his life. Now they looked at him like he'd brought plague into their midst. Elder Torrens spoke first, his weathered face grave. "Alpha, we must address the situation directly. You've brought the albino back into pack territory, after you yourself declared her cursed and banished her to die." "I was wrong," Riker said flatly. A ripple of shock moved through the room. Alphas didn't admit fault, not publicly, not about matters of such magnitude. Counselor Breck leaned forward, his scarred face twisted with disgust. Wrong. You condemned her for good reason, Alpha. The pack agreed then, and we agree now. Ghost wolves are death omens. Every pack that's harbored one has fallen to ruin. It's documented going back centuries. Then the documentation is incomplete, Riker said coldly. Because she's been alive in the frozen wastes for 5 years, keeping our son breathing in conditions that would kill any of us within hours. Your alleged son, Breck countered. We have only your word that the child is yours. Albinos are known for trickery, for manipulating alpha bonds. He has my eyes. Riker's voice dropped to a growl. My bone structure, my blood. Anyone with functioning vision can see the truth. A convenient resemblance, another counselor muttered. Or ghost wolf illusions. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. Enough! I was there when we found them. I saw the child emerge from 5 years in the wastes without a scratch. That's not illusion, that's miracle. That's power we've never seen. Exactly, Breck said, his voice rising. Power we don't understand. Power that could destroy us. Alpha, think rationally. You have a responsibility to this pack that supersedes any personal feelings about a mate bond you yourself tried to sever. He stood, addressing the room. I propose we send the woman and child away. Provide them with resources, settlement elsewhere, but keep them far from Northern Territory. The pack's safety must come first. Several counselors nodded agreement. More remained silent, but their faces showed which way they leaned. She's dying, Riker said quietly. The room stilled. Lumi is in ghost wolf stasis. She burned away her own life force to keep Pax alive. She has days left, maybe less. Sending her away is a death sentence. Then let her die away from here, Breck said brutally. Better one cursed Omega than our entire pack when whatever doom she carries manifests. How dare you? Marcus started, but Riker held up a hand. I'm going to perform the mate bond ritual, Riker announced. Ilera believes that transferring my life force through the bond can save her. The ritual begins tomorrow. The room erupted. Voices rose in protest, arguing over each other, some standing from their seats in outrage. You would bind yourself permanently to a curse. What about pack law? About choosing strength over weakness? This is insanity. Enough! Riker's alpha command rolled through the chamber like thunder. Every wolf in the room felt it in their bones, the weight of authority that made lesser wolves bare their throats. Silence fell instantly. I am alpha of this pack. I decide who belongs here. I decide who receives protection. And I have decided that my mate and my son are under pack law. Anyone who challenges this challenges me directly. It was the nuclear option, a direct challenge to his authority. And judging by the calculating looks on several faces, at least a few counselors were considering whether they could win that fight. The chamber door opened. Every head turned. Pax stood in the doorway, small and pale in an oversized shirt someone had found for him. His white hair, so like his mother's, caught the lamplight. His golden eyes swept the room, taking in the hostile faces, the aggressive postures, the atmosphere of barely restrained violence. Papa, Pax's voice was tiny in the sudden silence. I couldn't find you. The halls are confusing. Riker's heart lurched. Pax, you should be resting. What is that thing doing here? Breck snarled. This is a council meeting. Children aren't permitted, especially not. Especially not what? Riker's voice was lethal. Especially not cursed mongrels who have no business in civilized pack territory, Breck finished, his lips curling back from his teeth. The words hung in the air like poison. Pax stood very still, his small hands clenched at his sides. Something shifted in his expression, not fear, but something older, deeper. Recognition, perhaps, that the cruelty his mother had warned him about was real. I'm not cursed, Pax said quietly. Mama says cursed means broken. I'm not broken, I'm just different. Your mother is a liar and a manipulator, Breck spat. Ghost wolves have been corruption since the ancient times. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost spread across the stone floor in crystalline patterns, racing outward from where Pax stood. The lamps flickered. Breath misted in the suddenly frigid air. Ice crystals formed on the surface of the water pitcher, on the edges of the table, on the windows. Pax's eyes had changed. The gold was still there, but now they glowed with pale blue-white light, like moonlight on glaciers. His white hair lifted slightly, moved by a wind that existed only around him. "Don't," Pax said, and his voice carried harmonics that made every wolf in the room want to bow, to submit, to acknowledge something ancient and powerful. "Talk about my mama that way." Warriors reached for weapons. Others shifted partially, claws extending, preparing for attack or defense. The room teetered on the edge of violence. "Stand down," Riker roared, moving between his son and the council. "All of you stand down now." But it was Elder Torin who broke the spell. The ancient wolf rose slowly from his seat, his eyes fixed on Pax with something like awe. "Impossible," Torin breathed. "I never thought, in my lifetime, I never thought I'd see." "See what?" Breck demanded, though his voice had lost its edge. He, like everyone else, was staring at the frost patterns spreading across the floor, not random, but geometric, deliberate, beautiful. "The frost child," Torin said reverently. "The prophecy, from the oldest texts." He turned to address the room, his voice gaining strength. "In the age when darkness rises, when ancient evils wake, the moon will send a child of two bloods, alpha strength and ghost wolf magic combined. The child will walk between warmth and cold, between life and death. The child will be the shield when all other defenses fail." "That's a myth," someone protested weakly. "Does this look like myth?" Torin gestured to Pax, who still stood haloed in cold light, frost spreading from his feet. "A 5-year-old child manifesting ghost wolf magic strong enough to freeze a room full of adult wolves. This is not curse. This is prophecy fulfilled." "Or it's exactly the danger we feared," Breck argued, though he'd backed away from the table. "Uncontrolled power in a child who doesn't understand what he is." "I understand what I am," Pax interrupted. The glow in his eyes dimmed slightly and the temperature began to rise. The frost stopped spreading. "Mama told me. She said I'm both things, strong like Papa, magical like her. She said that makes me special, not broken." He looked directly at Breck. "And she said people who are afraid try to hurt what they don't understand because being mean is easier than being brave." The council chamber erupted into chaos. Half the wolves were arguing that, prophecy or not, the child was dangerous. Others were demanding to know more about the texts Elder Torin referenced. Breck was shouting about Pax safety. Marcus was threatening to throw people out bodily. Through it all, Pax walked calmly to Riker and took his hand. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly, looking up at his father. "I didn't mean to make the cold happen. It just comes out when I'm upset." Riker knelt down, cupping his son's face in his hands. "You did nothing wrong, nothing. Do you understand me?" "Then why are they so angry?" "Because they're afraid. Just like your mother said, being afraid makes people cruel." Pax nodded slowly. "Mama was afraid sometimes too, in the cave when the wind was very loud, but she never let the fear make her mean." His golden blue eyes searched Riker's face. "Will you let them send us away?" "Never," Riker promised. He stood, keeping Pax's hand firmly in his own, and faced the chaotic council. Silence. The room quieted reluctantly. "My son and my mate stay," Riker declared. "They are pack. They are family. They are protected by my authority as Alpha and by pack law. Anyone who cannot accept this should leave now, because I will not debate it further." Several counselors exchanged dark looks. Breck's face was murderous, but no one stood, no one challenged. Not yet. The bonding ritual took 12 hours. Riker knelt in the consecrated circle while Alara chanted words in the old tongue, burning herbs that filled the room with acrid smoke. The mate bond, suppressed for so long, tore through his chest like a living thing, painful, overwhelming, desperate. He felt Lumi on the other end of it, felt her flickering like a candle in a storm, and he poured everything he had into that connection. His strength, his life force, his regret and his hope and his love. When it was done, he collapsed, drained to his core. Alara caught him before he hit the floor. It's done, she said softly. Now we wait. They waited 3 days. 3 days during which Riker barely left the healing room, watching Lumi's frozen form gradually thaw. Color returned to her cheeks. Her chest began to rise and fall with shallow breaths. The blue tint left her lips. Pax stayed with him, curled in a chair, talking to his mother in soft whispers, telling her about honey cakes and doors and how Papa's wolf form was beautiful, promising that everything would be all right. On the morning of the 4th day, Lumi's eyes opened. Riker saw it happen. One moment she was still, peaceful in sleep. The next, her crimson eyes, those striking, haunting eyes that marked her as Ghost Wolf, flickered open and focused on the ceiling. "Ilara," Riker called quietly. "She's waking." The healer rushed over. Other attendants gathered. Lumi's head turned slowly, taking in the room. The warm walls, the soft bed, the unfamiliar faces hovering over her. Then her eyes found Riker. Terror, pure, absolute terror flooded her face. She tried to sit up, to move, but her body wouldn't cooperate. 5 years of stasis had left her weak, her muscles atrophied. She managed to prop herself on one elbow, gasping, and her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal seeking escape. "No," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse from disuse, barely audible. No, this isn't. Where am I? Where's—" Her breath came faster, panicked. "Where's Pax?" "Lumi, you need to stay calm," Ilara said, moving to place a steadying hand on her shoulder. Lumi flinched away violently. "Don't touch me. Where is my son? What did you do with my son?" "He's safe," Riker said, taking a step forward. "Pax is." Lumi's eyes snapped to him, and the terror intensified into something worse. Recognition. And with recognition came a flood of memories that played across her face like a nightmare. The banishment, the pregnancy accusations, the cruel words, the walk into the frozen wastes knowing she was condemned to death. "You," she breathed. Her whole body began to shake. No, you can't have him. You can't." She tried to stand, to shift into her wolf form, but her body betrayed her. She collapsed back onto the bed, weak and helpless, and that helplessness made the panic worse. "Lumi, please." Riker reached for her. "Don't touch me." The scream tore from her throat, raw and broken. The temperature in the room plummeted. Frost formed on the windows. Stay away from me. Where's Pax? What did you do to my son?" "I'll get him," Marcus said quickly, and disappeared through the door. Riker stood frozen, watching his mate who he'd sent to die, who'd survived the impossible, who'd sacrificed everything to protect their child, curl into herself on the bed, shaking with terror and rage. "You sent us to die," Lumi whispered, her eyes fixed on him with devastating clarity. "You looked at me, pregnant with your child, and you sent us to the frozen wastes to die. You called our son a lie, called me cursed." "I know," Riker said hoarsely. "Lumi, I—" "Don't," her voice cracked. "Don't you dare apologize. Don't you dare try to explain. There is no explanation that matters. You condemned your own child to death before he was born." The door burst open and Pax rushed in, Marcus close behind. The boy's face was tear-streaked, his eyes wild with relief and desperation. "Mama." Lumi's expression transformed. The terror melted into pure joy, into a love so fierce it made the air tremble. "Pax! Oh, my Pax!" He scrambled onto the bed and threw himself into her arms. Lumi caught him, clutching him to her chest with what little strength she had, and began to sob, deep, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere primal and broken. "You're safe," she kept whispering into his hair, her hands running over him frantically, checking for injuries, for signs of harm. "You're safe. You're here. You're breathing. Oh, moon above, you're safe." "I'm okay, Mama," Pax said, his small arms wrapped around her neck. "Papa saved you. He did the ritual and everything. Elder Ilara said you were dying, but Papa gave you his life force through the mate bond and—" Lumi's whole body went rigid. Her crimson eyes lifted to meet Riker's over Pax's shoulder, and the look in them was colder than any frozen waste. "He did what?" "The bonding ritual," Pax said, not understanding the danger in his mother's voice. To save you. Papa poured his life into you so you wouldn't die. It took 12 hours and he collapsed after and... Get out, Lumi said quietly. She wasn't looking at Pax. She was looking at Riker. Mama. Not you, sweetheart, him. Her voice was gentle with Pax but turned to ice when she addressed Riker. Get out. Lumi, we need to talk. We have nothing to say to each other. She held Pax tighter, as if Riker might try to take him. You sent us to die. We survived in spite of you. For 5 years, I kept our son alive while you lived in comfort, while you ruled your pack, while you tried to sever the mate bond and forget we existed. I never forgot, Riker said desperately. Not for 1 day, not for 1 hour. Good, Lumi snapped. I hope it tortured you. I hope every comfortable night in your warm bed you thought about us freezing in that cave. I hope the mate bond screamed in your chest the way mine did, knowing you were alive and well while your son learned to speak in a frozen cave with only his dying mother for company. The words hit like physical blows. Riker had no defense. Everything she said was true. I was wrong, he said. I was a coward and a fool and I destroyed everything that mattered. But Lumi, please just let me. Let you what? Explain. Apologize. Lumi's laugh was bitter and broken. You performed the bonding ritual. You forced life into me through a mate bond I never wanted, that you spent 5 years trying to destroy. Did you ask my permission? Did you consider that maybe I'd rather die than be bound to the man who murdered her voice broke. Who tried to murder our son? You were dying, Riker said helplessly. Pax was terrified. I had to. You didn't have to do anything. You could have let me go. Let us both go. We were free of you. Tears streamed down Lumi's face, but her voice remained steady. For 5 years, I told myself that surviving was enough, that keeping Pax alive was worth burning away my own life. And it was. Every moment of cold, every degree of my essence I sacrificed. It was worth it because he was safe from you. Mama, Pax said quietly, his voice small and scared. Papa's not bad. He takes care of me. He tells me stories and lets me ride on his wolf, and he promised we'd all be together. Lumi's eyes closed. Fresh tears spilled over. Oh, sweetheart, he's very good at promises, but promises don't mean anything when actions say different. She finally looked at Riker again, and the mate bond, newly restored, raw and open, carried the full weight of her pain, her rage, her grief directly into his chest. It was agony, for both of them. The bond screamed for unity, for reconciliation, for the natural completion that mates were meant to share. But Lumi's will was iron, forged in 5 years of impossible survival. Stay away from my son, she said with devastating finality. You saved my life. Fine, I'm alive. But that doesn't earn you forgiveness. That doesn't make you his father. Pax survived because I protected him from you, and I'll keep protecting him from you for as long as I breathe. He is my son, Riker said, his voice breaking. No, Lumi corrected coldly. He's the child you tried to kill. There's a difference. She turned her face away, dismissing him as completely as he'd once dismissed her. Pax looked between his parents, confusion and distress written across his young face. The mate bond howled in despair, the severing agony of 2 souls meant to be one, forced apart by justified rage. Riker stood there for a long moment, every instinct screaming at him to fight, to argue, to force her to understand. But he'd forced enough. He'd forced her into banishment, forced her into near death, forced life back into her without asking. Maybe it was time to stop forcing and start accepting consequences. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out, leaving his mate and his son in the healing room, together and alive and wanting nothing to do with him. The door closed behind him with a soft click. In the hallway, Marcus waited. Alpha. Riker kept walking, his chest feeling like it had been carved open. The mate bond thrashed inside him, wounded and desperate, but he forced himself to keep moving. Give them space, he said. Post guards outside the healing room. No one enters without Lumi's permission, not even me, especially not me. And if she tries to leave, to take the boy, then let her go. The first sentry disappeared 3 nights after Lumi woke. A seasoned warrior named Kale, stationed on the northern border, simply vanished between patrols. They found his post abandoned, his weapons lying in the snow, frost patterns spreading outward from where he'd stood like a grotesque flower. No tracks, no scent, no body. Just absence, and cold that shouldn't exist even in the depths of winter. The second disappearance came the next night, then a third. By the fifth night, the pack was in uproar. Warriors refused solo patrols. Families kept their children indoors. And the livestock, 12 head of cattle, found frozen solid in their pen, eyes wide with terror, flesh crystallized into something that shattered like glass when touched. Riker called an emergency council meeting. The chamber filled with frightened, angry wolves demanding answers their alpha didn't have. "Something is hunting us," Marcus reported grimly. "Not an animal, not another pack. The tracks, when there are tracks, they're wrong. Too many legs or no legs at all. Shadows that move against the wind." "Ghost stories," Breck scoffed, but his face was pale. "We're being attacked by rival packs taking advantage of our situation." He glanced toward where everyone knew Lumi was recovering, still refusing to see Riker. "No pack could do this," a younger warrior protested. "I saw the shadows near the eastern border. They moved like smoke, but smoke doesn't hunt. Smoke doesn't watch." "It's the ghost wolf," someone muttered. "Ever since she came back, the darkness follows, the curse." "If you finish that sentence," Riker growled, "you'll be walking patrol alone tonight." Elder Torin had been silent throughout the meeting, his ancient face troubled. Now he rose slowly, and something in his bearing made the room quiet. "It's not the ghost wolf bringing darkness," Torin said. "It's the opposite. The darkness is here because of what the ghost wolf protected us from." He moved to the map table, his gnarled finger tracing the northern territories. "I've been researching since the boy manifested his power, diving into the oldest texts, the forbidden archives, and I found it, the Void Stalker." The name fell into the chamber like a stone into still water, sending ripples of unease through every wolf present. "That's a myth," someone said weakly. "A story to frighten cubs." "All myths begin as truth," Torin countered. "The Void Stalker awakens every 1,000 years. It's a creature of pure entropy, of endings, of the space between life and death. It consumes magical bloodlines to sustain itself, growing stronger with each one it devours." "Why haven't we heard of this before?" Riker demanded. "Because the last awakening was 1,000 years ago. The packs that faced it didn't survive to pass down complete records. Only fragments remain." Torin pulled a leather-bound tome from his satchel, its pages brittle with age. "But there's a pattern. Whenever the Void Stalker rises, nature responds. It sends defenders, protectors with the power to create barriers against the darkness." "Ghost wolves," Marcus breathed. "Albino Omegas," Torin confirmed. "Born with the ability to generate protective magic, to create zones of life in the heart of death. They're not curses, they're shields, the moon's answer to the void." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Riker's mind raced, pieces falling into terrible place. Lumi, surviving 5 years in the frozen wastes where nothing should live. The warm pocket around Pax. The way the cave had felt wrong, saturated with magic. "She was holding a barrier," Riker said slowly. "All those years, she was protecting Pax from something we couldn't see." "Precisely," Torin said. "The Void Stalker was circling, waiting, but it couldn't penetrate her defenses. As long as she maintained the barrier, the boy was safe. But now..." "Now she's weak," Marcus finished. "The barrier is down. And the Void Stalker knows exactly where to find its prize." Torin's eyes fixed on Riker. "A child with both alpha blood and ghost wolf magic. If the Void Stalker consumes him, it will gain unprecedented power. Enough to destroy not just our pack, but potentially every pack in the northern territories." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Riker felt ice forming in his veins that had nothing to do with temperature. "How do we fight it?" he asked. "We can't, not directly. Claws and teeth mean nothing to shadow and void." Torin turned pages in the ancient text, revealing illustrations of creatures that hurt to look at, things with too many limbs, too many eyes, shapes that defied geometry. The only defense is ghost wolf magic, a barrier strong enough to repel it, or powerful enough to bind it back into dormancy. Then Lumi. Lumi is too weak. The stasis nearly killed her. She's recovering, but generating that level of protective magic again. Torin shook his head. It would consume what little life force she has left. The door to the council chamber burst open. A guard stumbled in, his face ashen with terror. Alpha, the northern wall, something's there. In the darkness beyond the torchlight, it's watching. Everyone rushed to the windows overlooking the northern border. Riker's blood turned to ice. Beyond the perimeter, where the forest met the cleared territory, shadows moved wrong. They coiled and twisted against the natural darkness, darker than dark, like holes cut in reality itself. And within those shadows, things glinted. Eyes, perhaps, or something that mimicked eyes. Too many of them, watching, waiting. Moon above, Marcus whispered. What is that? The Void Stalker, Torin said grimly. It's testing our defenses, looking for the boy. A scream cut through the night. One of the outer buildings, a guard post, collapsed inward, imploding as if crushed by invisible pressure. The shadows surged forward, and where they touched, frost spread in geometric patterns that looked almost beautiful, almost alive. Sound the alarm, Riker commanded. Get every non-combatant to the inner chambers, warriors to the walls, now. The pack mobilized with practiced efficiency, but Riker could see the fear in their eyes. How did you fight something that wasn't entirely real? How did you kill a shadow? Torin gripped Riker's arm. You need to tell Lumi. She needs to know what's coming. She won't see me. Then make her. Alpha, this isn't about your broken bond anymore. This is about survival. Hers, the boy's, all of ours. Riker was already moving, Marcus at his heels. They raced through corridors filled with frightened pack members evacuating to safer areas. The healing room was on the opposite side of the complex, away from the northern wall. The guards outside looked relieved to see him. Let me in, Riker ordered. The lady said. I don't care what she said. Open the door or I go through it. They opened it. Lumi sat in a chair by the window, Pax asleep in her lap. She'd regained some strength. Her face had more color, her movements more certainty. But she was still painfully thin, still weak. She looked up as Riker entered, and her expression hardened. I said no visitors. Something's attacking the pack, Riker said bluntly. The Void Stalker. Elder Torin says it's here for Pax. Lumi's face went white. No, it can't. It's too soon. I felt it circling in the wastes, but the barrier held. It shouldn't have found us this quickly. You know about it. I didn't know what it was called, just that there was something in the darkness, something ancient and hungry. Her arms tightened around Pax protectively. I felt it watching us year after year. That's why I went into stasis, not just to keep Pax warm, but to hide him. The barrier masked his magical signature. The barrier's gone now, Riker said, and it's at our walls. Lumi tried to stand, still holding Pax. She made it halfway before her legs gave out. Riker caught her before she fell, and for a moment they were close enough that the mate bond flared between them, desperate, aching, begging for unity. She pulled away as soon as she had her balance. I can rebuild the barrier. Give me an hour to prepare. You're too weak. Torin says it would kill you. Then I'll die protecting my son. Her crimson eyes blazed with fierce determination. Better that than let the darkness take him. There has to be another way. There isn't. Ghost wolf magic is the only defense, and I'm the only ghost wolf here. She looked down at Pax, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger circling. This is what I was born for, why the moon made me what I am. Riker looked at his mate, his brave, impossible mate who'd survived 5 years of hell and was now preparing to sacrifice herself again. The mate he'd condemned. The mate he'd saved. The mate who couldn't forgive him but would still die for their son. No, Riker said firmly. You don't get a vote. Yes, I do, because Pax has both bloodlines, Alpha and Ghost Wolf, which means the barrier doesn't have to come from you alone. He met her shocked gaze steadily. Torin said the only defense is ghost wolf magic, but the mate bond connects us now. What if we channel it together? Your magic, my strength. That's never been done. Then we'll be the first. Riker extended his hand. Let me protect them, both of you. Let me do what I should have done 5 years ago. Lumi stared at his hand like it was a trap. The mate bond pulled between them, screaming for connection. Outside, another building collapsed. Screams echoed through the complex. I don't trust you, Lumi whispered. I know, but you trust that I love our son. And I do, Lumi, with everything I am. Her hand trembled as she reached for his. They laid Pax in the secured inner chamber, wrapped in furs and guarded by Marcus and 4 of their most trusted warriors. The boy had woken briefly, confused and frightened by the commotion, but Lumi had sung him back to sleep with a melody that made frost patterns dance across the ceiling. Even exhausted, even terrified, she was still protecting him. The ritual preparation took an hour. Ilara drew symbols on the stone floor of the great hall in ash and silver dust, ancient wards meant to channel and amplify magical energy. Lumi stood in the center, swaying slightly, her white hair loose around her shoulders. She looked ethereal and fragile, like she might shatter at a touch. Riker took his place opposite her in the circle. The mate bond hummed between them, wary but present. This will hurt, Ilara warned. Channeling this much power through a bond that's been damaged, that's barely healed, it's going to feel like being torn apart. We know, Lumi said quietly. And if it fails, if the barrier doesn't hold, the Void Stalker will breach the walls. It will come straight for Pax. Then we don't fail, Riker said. They were about to begin when heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. The council burst in, Breck at the lead, flanked by a dozen senior warriors and advisors. Their faces were set with grim determination. Stop this, Breck commanded. Stop this now. Riker's eyes narrowed. We're in the middle of defending the pack. You're in the middle of binding yourself to a death omen that brought this curse upon us. Breck's voice rang through the hall. The council has convened. We've made a decision. This isn't the time. There's no better time. Breck moved closer, and other council members fanned out behind him. Not quite threatening, not quite not. The Void Stalker hunts the boy. It came here because you brought the ghost wolf back. The solution is simple, Alpha. Send them away, both of them. Let the creature follow them far from our territory. You want me to sacrifice my mate and son to save the pack, Riker said flatly. We want you to make the choice you should have made 5 years ago. Choose the many over the few. Choose strength over sentiment. Breck's expression was hard. Or we will make the choice for you. The threat hung in the air, a challenge to his authority, to his position as Alpha. Marcus moved to stand beside Riker, hand on his weapon. You're talking about a coup, during an active attack. We're talking about survival, another counselor said. The pack comes first, it always has. That's what it means to be Alpha. The Alpha decides what comes first, Riker countered, not the council. Then decide, Breck said. Right now, send the ghost wolf and her cursed spawn away or step down. Those are your only options. The great hall fell silent except for the distant sounds of battle preparation. Warriors shouting, barriers being erected, the pack mobilizing against a threat they couldn't truly fight. Riker had been Alpha for 8 years. It was his identity, his purpose, the role he'd trained for since he could walk. His father had been Alpha, his grandfather before him. 7 generations of his bloodline had led the Northern Territories. To step down was to erase that legacy, to become nothing, to lose everything that defined him. And yet, you have 1 hour to make your choice, Breck said. After that, we'll take matters into our own hands. They filed out, leaving Riker standing in the ritual circle with his mate, his beta. And the crushing weight of an impossible decision. Alpha, Marcus said quietly. You can't step down, not now. The pack needs strong leadership, especially during a crisis. Without your authority, there'll be chaos, infighting. We'll tear ourselves apart before the Void Stalker even reaches the walls. So what are you saying? Marcus's face was troubled. I'm saying, You can't protect anyone if you're not in power. Maybe Breck is right. Maybe the way to save the most lives is to sacrifice my family. Riker's voice was cold. To send them out into the darkness alone. To let that thing consume them while we hide behind walls. I'm saying you're Alpha. Your duty is to the pack. All of it, not just 2 individuals. Lumi spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. He's right. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. That's pack law. That's survival. She met Riker's eyes, and something broken lingered in her gaze. Pax and I have survived worse. We'll leave, find somewhere else you don't have to choose. Yes, Riker said, I do. He turned and walked out of the great hall, ignoring Marcus's calls, ignoring Alara's protests. His feet carried him through corridors and up staircases until he emerged onto the roof of the main keep, the highest point in the territory, where Alphas went to think, to be alone with the moon and stars. He wasn't alone. Pax sat at the roof's edge, his small legs dangling over the drop, looking up at the night sky. He shouldn't have been able to get past the guards, shouldn't have been able to climb this high. But then, Pax had survived 5 years in the frozen wastes. A few guards and some stairs were nothing. You should be in the safe room, Riker said, moving to sit beside his son. I couldn't sleep. The stars are different here than in the wastes. Pax pointed upward. See that cluster? In the cave, it was directly overhead. Mama said it was the Wolf Pack constellation. She said someday we'd be part of a real pack and run under those stars. Riker's throat tightened. Did she tell you anything else about me? Pax was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, Mama says my papa was afraid of what people would think. She said sometimes fear makes people hurt the ones they love. He turned those golden eyes, Riker's own eyes, on his father. She said it doesn't make it okay, but it makes it understandable, that people aren't just good or bad, they're complicated. Your mother is the wisest person I've ever known, Riker said, and I was a fool. The council wants us to leave. It wasn't a question. Pax had always been frighteningly perceptive. Yes. Are you going to let them make us go? The question hung in the cold night air. Below them, the pack scrambled to prepare defenses against an enemy they couldn't fight. Behind them, the council waited for a decision that would define everything. And beside him, his 5-year-old son, the child he'd condemned to death, the child who'd survived against all odds, watched stars and waited for his father to choose. Riker thought about power, about legacy, about the weight of the Alpha title that had defined him for so long. Then he thought about Pax's laugh when he rode on his wolf form, about Lumi's fierce protection, burning away her own life to keep their son safe. About 5 years stolen because he'd been too afraid of what others would think. Mama said you sent us away because being Alpha was more important than being a father, Pax said quietly. Is that still true? And suddenly, the choice was simple. No, Riker said. It was never true. I was just too much of a coward to see it. He put his arm around his son's small shoulders. Pax, I'm going to tell you something important. Being Alpha means leading the pack, but being a father means protecting your family. And sometimes you can't do both. Which one matters more? Riker looked down at the pack below, his pack, his responsibility, his legacy. Then he looked at his son, small and brave and brilliant, sitting beside him under the stars. You do, Riker said. You and your mother, you matter more. Pax leaned against him, and Riker felt something shift in his chest. Not the mate bond, something deeper. The understanding that power meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. That legacy meant nothing if it was built on the graves of the people you were supposed to love. Are we going to leave then? Pax asked. Go back to the wastes. No, Riker said firmly. We're going to fight, all of us together. And if the council doesn't like it, they can choose a new Alpha. He stood, bringing Pax with him, and headed back down to the Great Hall. Marcus was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, his face anxious. Alpha, what's your decision? Riker walked past him without slowing. Get the council. Tell them I've made my choice. The Great Hall filled quickly. The council assembled, Breck's expression smug with anticipated victory. Warriors lined the walls. Lumi stood in the ritual circle, pale but defiant, clearly expecting to be cast out again. Riker took his position at the head of the hall, the Alpha's position. "You wanted my decision," he said, his voice carrying to every corner. "Here it is. I reject your ultimatum. My mate and son stay. They are pack. They are family. They are under my protection." "Then you leave us no choice," Breck said. "By the power vested in the Council." "I'm not finished." Riker removed the Alpha's circlet from his head, the silver band that marked his authority, worn by 7 generations of his bloodline. He held it up for all to see. "You're right that I can't protect my family and lead the pack. Not when the pack's leadership demands I choose between them, so I'm making it easy for you." He placed the circlet on the table. "I step down as Alpha of the Northern Territories, effective immediately. Marcus, you're next in line. The pack is yours." Shocked silence rippled through the hall. "You're abdicating." Marcus looked stunned. "I'm choosing what matters." Riker moved to stand beside Lumi in the ritual circle. "My family, and I'm going to protect them whether I'm Alpha or not." He met Breck's eyes. "You wanted me to choose. I have. Now get out of our way so we can save you all from the darkness you're too afraid to face." The Void Stalker came at midnight. The northern wall exploded inward without warning, stone and timber disintegrating into crystalline fragments that hung suspended in the air for a heartbeat before falling like deadly rain. Warriors scrambled for positions, weapons drawn, but their battle cries died in their throats when they saw what poured through the breach. It wasn't one creature. It was wrongness given form. Shadow that moved against the wind, flowing like oil and smoke combined. Limbs that existed and didn't exist, phasing in and out of reality. Eyes, dozens, hundreds of them, opening and closing across its surface like stars blinking in and out of existence. It had no true shape, just the suggestion of form, the nightmare of what a predator might look like if nightmares could take physical shape. Where it passed, temperature plummeted. Warriors caught in its path froze mid-step, their bodies crystallizing into grotesque ice sculptures, faces locked in eternal screams. "Hold the line," Marcus, now Alpha Marcus, though he looked like he wanted to refuse the title, commanded from the walls. Warriors fired arrows that passed through the darkness like it wasn't there. Others shifted into wolf form and attacked with claws and teeth, only to have their attacks pass through shadow as if fighting smoke. The Void Stalker swept forward like a tide of darkness. Where it touched, reality seemed to fray. Stone crumbled. Wood rotted in seconds. Living flesh froze solid, ice crystals forming in blood and marrow. It moved with horrible grace, flowing rather than walking, and within its mass, hundreds of eyes opened and closed at random, some that looked almost human, others completely alien. "Fall back," Marcus roared from the walls. "Everyone to the inner keep, now." Warriors retreated in organized chaos, dragging wounded comrades, abandoning the outer defenses. The Void Stalker flowed over the walls like smoke, touching nothing but leaving frost in its wake. Where its shadow passed, torches gutted out. Steel became brittle and shattered. Living wood cracked and died. In the great hall, Riker and Lumi stood in the ritual circle. They'd clasped hands, and Alara was chanting the words that would link their powers, but the ritual required time they no longer had. "It's moving too fast," Marcus shouted from the doorway, his sword drawn uselessly. "It's already past the outer defenses." Through the windows, they could see it. The Void Stalker wasn't one creature. It was a mass of living darkness, constantly shifting, reforming, flowing like oil and smoke. Shapes emerged and dissolved within it, too many limbs, too many eyes. Geometries that hurt to perceive. Where it touched, life ended. Warriors who stood in its path froze solid in seconds, their bodies crystallizing into ice sculptures of their final moments of terror. "We're not ready," Alara said frantically, still drawing symbols around the ritual circle. "The preparation isn't complete." "We're out of time," Lumi said. Her crimson eyes tracked the darkness flowing through the territory like a living tide. "It's here for Pax. It won't stop until it has him." The great hall's doors exploded inward. Not broken, simply ceased to exist, matter converting to shadow and dissipating like smoke. The temperature plummeted. Frost raced across the stone floor in geometric patterns that hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't exist in natural ice. And through the doorway came the Void Stalker. It wasn't one creature. It was wrongness given form. Shadows that moved independently, coiling and writhing like living smoke. Within the darkness, things glinted, dozens of eyes, or perhaps windows into some deeper void, watching with ancient and terrible intelligence. Its shape kept shifting, never quite solid, sometimes humanoid, sometimes beast-like, sometimes simply a hole in reality that hurt to perceive. Where it touched, life ended. A warrior standing too close to its shadow collapsed, his body crystallizing into frost-covered stillness. A support beam turned brittle and shattered. The stone floor cracked with cold so intense it burned. "Defend the inner CHAMBRS," Marcus roared, newly crowned alpha, trying desperately to organize a defense against something that couldn't be fought with claws and teeth. Warriors charged. Their weapons passed through shadow. The Void Stalker didn't so much move as flow, pouring through their defensive lines like smoke through fingers. Where it touched, wolves fell, not dead, but frozen in place, their bodies crystallizing into ice sculptures of their final moments. Trapped between life and death, neither breathing nor gone. Riker fought with desperate fury, his alpha strength meaning nothing against an enemy that had no physical form to tear. His claws passed through shadow. His teeth closed on emptiness. Around him, warriors fell one by one, frozen mid-strike, their faces locked in eternal terror. "Fall back," Marcus shouted, rallying those who could still move. "Get to the inner chambers, protect the civilians." But the Void Stalker moved like thought, faster than running, inevitable as nightfall. It flowed through the territory like oil spreading across water, and everywhere it touched, frost bloomed and life ended. Warriors who stood against it simply stopped, frozen mid-motion, their expressions locked in final moments of terror. Riker fought anyway. His claws raked through shadow and found nothing. His teeth snapped on darkness that tasted like the death of stars. The creature, if it could be called a creature, towered over the buildings, a mass of writhing darkness studded with eyes that gleamed with alien intelligence. Where it moved, reality seemed to bend. Warriors charged it and were frozen mid-stride, their bodies crystallizing into grotesque ice sculptures. "Fall back," Marcus screamed. "Everyone fall back to the inner keep." But retreat meant abandoning the outer defenses, meant letting the thing get closer to where the non-combatants sheltered, closer to where Pax was hidden. Riker shifted into his wolf form, massive, powerful, the apex predator. He launched himself at the Void Stalker's nearest appendage, claws extended. His claws passed through shadow like trying to cut smoke. The creature didn't even acknowledge him. It simply flowed around his attack, and where its darkness touched, frost spread across his fur, burning cold that sank into his bones. He shifted back to human form, gasping. Other warriors attacked from different angles, coordinated, brave, desperate. The Void Stalker swept through them like they were nothing. Shadows lashed out, and where they touched, wolves froze mid-stride. Not dead, not exactly, just stopped, crystallized, trapped between one moment and the next. "Fall back," Marcus shouted. "Get the non-combatants to the inner keep." But the Void Stalker wasn't interested in the warriors. Its attention, if something without a true face could have attention, fixed on the central building, where Pax was hidden. The creature moved like oil sliding across water, flowing over and through defenses that should have stopped anything physical. Warriors attacked it with claws and teeth and weapons, and their strikes passed through shadow, accomplishing nothing. Where it touched, frost spread instantly. Warriors froze mid-motion, their bodies crystallizing into horrific statues of ice and terror. "Fall back," Marcus roared. "Everyone back to the inner keep." But the Void Stalker wasn't interested in the warriors. It flowed past them like smoke, leaving trails of frozen carnage in its wake, heading with terrible purpose toward the center of the territory, toward the secured chamber where Pax was hidden. Riker ran, Marcus and a dozen warriors at his heels. They reached the inner chamber to find the guards already down, frozen solid at their posts, faces locked in expressions of absolute terror. The door had been torn from its hinges, not smashed, but unmade, as if reality itself had simply decided the door no longer needed to exist. Inside, Pax stood in the center of the room, his small body glowing with pale blue-white light. Frost spread across the floor in defensive patterns, creating a barrier between him and the doorway. But the barrier was thin, flickering, unstable. A 5-year-old's power, no matter how prodigious, wasn't enough. And in the doorway, blocking the only exit, stood the Void Stalker. It was worse than the descriptions, worse than the ancient texts. It wasn't simply a creature, it was wrongness made manifest. Shadows folded in on themselves in impossible geometries. What might have been limbs stretched and contracted in ways that hurt to perceive. Eyes, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, opened and closed across its form like breathing wounds. It radiated cold, but not the clean cold of winter. This was the cold of entropy, of endings, of the space between heartbeats where nothing exists. "Pax!" Lumi's scream tore through the air. She'd been recovering in the inner chambers when the attack began, but now she stood at the entrance to the courtyard, her face ashen with terror. The Void Stalker had breached the walls. The warriors Riker had positioned throughout the territory lay frozen where they'd stood, not dead, but trapped in crystallized moments of fear, their bodies preserved in ice that pulsed with wrongness. The creature itself defied description. Shadow given form, but the form kept shifting. Sometimes it had legs, too many legs. Sometimes it flowed like water. Always it had eyes. Dozens of them, hundreds, appearing and disappearing across its surface, watching everything, hungry for everything. And it was moving toward Pax. The boy stood frozen in the center of the courtyard, where he'd been playing with the stones he collected. His small face was tilted up, staring at the impossible thing approaching him with the curiosity of a child who didn't yet understand that some things should inspire only terror. "Pax!" Lumi screamed, running toward her son. Riker was already moving. He shifted mid-stride, his wolf form bursting forth, massive, dark-furred, powerful. He leaped between his son and the creature, snarling, snapping at shadows that slid away from his teeth like smoke. The Void Stalker paused, those countless eyes fixed on Riker, and he felt its attention like physical weight, ancient, patient, utterly alien. It had waited 1,000 years. It could wait a few moments more. Riker lunged, claws extended, going for what might have been a throat. His claws passed through shadow and found nothing. The creature flowed around him like water around a stone, reforming behind him, closer to Pax. Marcus and the remaining warriors attacked from all sides. Arrows, spears, teeth, and claws, all of it useless. The Void Stalker simply wasn't there when weapons should have connected, then reformed an instant later, always advancing, always moving toward the boy. Lumi reached Pax first. She scooped him into her arms and her body began to glow, that pale blue-white light of ghost wolf magic. A barrier formed around them, a dome of crystalline light that hummed with power. The Void Stalker stopped. Its form rippled, and something like a head tilted, studying the barrier with those too many eyes. Then it pushed. The barrier cracked like glass. Lumi gasped, blood trickling from her nose. She was too weak. 5 years of stasis, barely recovered, trying to channel magic that should have taken weeks to rebuild. "Mama, no," Pax cried, his small hands coming up to help, his own magic flickering to life, gold-white instead of pure blue. The barrier strengthened slightly, but the Void Stalker pushed harder. More cracks appeared. Riker shifted back to human form, his mind racing. Physical attacks were useless. Lumi couldn't maintain the barrier alone. Pax was too young, untrained. They were going to fail. The creature would consume his son, would feast on that precious combination of bloodlines, and there was nothing. The mate bond flared in his chest. Of course. Riker ran to the barrier's edge. "Lumi, let me in." "You can't help," she gasped, her whole body trembling with effort. "It's ghost wolf magic you don't have." "We're bonded." Riker pressed his hands against the barrier. "Your magic, my strength, like we planned, let me in." For a heartbeat, Lumi hesitated. 5 years of betrayal warred with desperate need. Then the barrier opened just enough for Riker to slip through. He pulled her against him, one arm around her waist, the other joining hers in supporting the barrier. Pax was between them, his small hands on both his parents, his magic flowing instinctively. "I need you to trust me," Riker said urgently. "Not forgive, not forget, just trust for him." Lumi's eyes met his, crimson meeting gold. Then she nodded. She opened the mate bond fully. It was like being struck by lightning. Riker felt her magic flood into him, cold and ancient and impossibly beautiful. And through their bond, she felt his alpha strength, raw power that could tear through stone, the dominance that made other wolves submit, the primal force of his bloodline. Their powers didn't just combine. They merged. They became something new. Fire and ice, strength and magic, two halves of one impossible whole. The barrier exploded outward, no longer just defense but weapon. It slammed into the void stalker, and the creature recoiled for the first time, its form destabilizing. Those countless eyes widened. If eyes could express surprise, these did. Riker and Lumi moved as one. Her magic shaped the power. His strength fueled it. Between them, Pax's hybrid magic amplified everything, his child's instinctive understanding of both bloodlines creating bridges where none should exist. Light erupted from the barrier. Not cold blue-white, not warm gold, but something between. A radiance that the void stalker couldn't flow around, couldn't avoid, couldn't consume. The creature tried to retreat, but the barrier expanded, surrounding it, contracting. Symbols appeared in the light, ancient wards that Lumi didn't consciously know, but that her bloodline remembered. Binding marks, sealing signs. The void stalker thrashed, its form destabilizing further. It reached toward Pax with shadowy limbs that dissolved when they touched the combined magic of his parents. "Together," Lumi gasped. "Together," Riker agreed. They pushed, all of them mother, father, son. A family united by blood and magic and desperate love. The void stalker collapsed inward, compressing, being forced back into whatever space between spaces it had emerged from. Its countless eyes fixed on them one last time, promising return, promising hunger, promising that 1,000 years was nothing to something eternal. Then it was gone. The barrier held for 3 more heartbeats, sealing the space where the creature had been, ensuring it couldn't immediately return. Then the light faded. Riker and Lumi collapsed together, Pax between them. Around the courtyard, frozen warriors began to thaw, gasping back to life. The wrongness that had saturated the air dissipated. "Did we?" Lumi couldn't finish, too exhausted. "Yes," Riker said, holding both her and Pax close. "We did, together." Pax looked up at his parents, his young face solemn. "That was the scary thing you were protecting me from, Mama, the thing in the dark." "Yes, sweetheart. But it's gone now, because you and Papa worked together." Pax smiled, small and tired but genuine. "Maybe Mama was wrong. Maybe you're not so bad after all, Papa." Over their son's head, Lumi's eyes met Riker's. The mate bond hummed between them, no longer damaged, no longer suppressed, but fully present. Not healed, not forgiven, but there. A foundation, perhaps, for whatever came next. The aftermath took 3 days to fully comprehend. 17 warriors dead. Not from the void stalker directly. Those it had frozen were thawing now, confused and traumatized but alive. But from the structural collapses when it breached the walls. 42 injured. Half the northern quarter of the territory reduced to rubble and ice that wouldn't melt no matter how much heat was applied. And one alpha who'd abdicated his throne in the middle of a crisis. Marcus called a formal assembly on the 4th day after the battle. The entire pack gathered in what remained of the Great Hall. The roof was half collapsed, the northern wall missing entirely, but it was still the heart of the territory. Still the place where decisions were made. Riker stood before them, no longer wearing the Alpha's circlet. He'd bathed and dressed in simple clothes, no furs denoting rank, no ceremonial markings, just a man facing his people. "I stepped down as Alpha during the crisis," Riker said, his voice carrying to every corner of the damaged hall. "That decision stands. Marcus has proven himself more than capable, and he has my full support going forward." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others shocked. Breck and several council members looked torn between satisfaction at Riker's fall and horror at how it had happened. But before I step aside completely, I owe you all an accounting. Riker's eyes swept the assembly. 5 years ago, I condemned my mate to death. I sent a pregnant Omega into the frozen wastes because I was afraid. Afraid of what you would think. Afraid that her difference made her weak. Afraid that loving her would make me weak. The hall fell silent. I was wrong. About everything. Lumi survived 5 years in conditions that should have killed anyone within days. She kept our son alive by sacrificing her own life force. And when the Void Stalker came, the ancient enemy our ancestors could barely name, it was her ghost wolf magic that saved us all. The bloodline I called cursed was the only thing standing between this pack and extinction. He turned to where Lumi sat in a chair near the front, still too weak to stand for long. Pax was in her lap, watching his father with solemn golden eyes. I destroyed my family because I chose pride over love, power over people, the respect of wolves who didn't matter over the trust of the ones who did. Riker's voice didn't waver, though shame burned in his chest. I can't undo that. I can't give back the 5 years they suffered, but I can make sure everyone knows the truth. Lumi is not cursed. She is a hero, and if this pack can't see that, then you don't deserve her anyway. He removed the leather cord from around his neck, the one that bore his family crest, the mark of 7 generations of alphas. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of legacy, then placed it on the table before Marcus. I relinquish all claims to alpha bloodline authority. Marcus, you're not just acting alpha, you are alpha. The pack is yours. Marcus stood slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he picked up the cord and placed it around his own neck. I accept the responsibility, but Riker, you'll always have a place here. You and your family. That's not my decision to make. Riker turned to Lumi. It's hers. Every eye in the hall fixed on the pale Omega with crimson eyes who'd survived the impossible. She sat very still, Pax's weight solid and real in her arms. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. You saved us, Lumi said. You fought beside us when the darkness came. You chose us over power, and that matters. But Riker, you also destroyed us first. You sent us to die. You tried to erase the mate bond. You denied our son before he was even born. Her eyes met his across the hall. That doesn't disappear because you did the right thing once. I know. I don't forgive you. I might never forgive you. The trauma doesn't vanish because we fought together one night. I know, Riker said again. But, Lumi's hand tightened on Pax's shoulder. Pax deserves to know his father, to have the pack, the family, the safety I couldn't give him alone. And I'm tired of running, tired of surviving instead of living. She stood carefully, setting Pax on his feet. The boy immediately took his mother's hand, watching the exchange with the gravity of someone far older than 5. I'll stay, Lumi said. We'll stay, but not as your mate. Not yet, maybe not ever. I'll stay as a member of this pack, and you'll stay as Pax's father, nothing more. Not until, if you prove that the man who chose us over power is real, that he's not going to disappear the moment things get difficult or people start judging again. That's more than fair, Riker said quietly. And if you hurt him, Lumi's voice dropped to something fierce and deadly. If you make our son feel unwanted or lesser or wrong ever again, I will take him and disappear so completely you'll never find us. Void Stalker or no Void Stalker. Do you understand? Yes. Then we'll try, she looked at Marcus. If the pack will have us. Marcus stepped forward, his voice formal but warm. Lumi, the pack owes you a debt we can never repay. You held back the darkness when we didn't even know it was there. You saved my predecessor, my friend, when you had every reason to let him die. And you showed us that strength comes in forms we were too ignorant to recognize. He addressed the crowd. Anyone who speaks against Lumi or Pack's answers to me personally, they are Pack, they are protected, and they are honored, all in favor. A chorus of aye rose from the assembly. Not everyone, Breck and a few hardliners remained silent, but enough, more than enough. Elder Torin rose from his seat, ancient but unbowed. If I may speak, Alpha Marcus. At Marcus's nod, the elder turned to address the crowd. What we witnessed 4 days ago was prophecy fulfilled. The Frost Child and his parents united against impossible darkness. This pack stands today because we had a ghost wolf when we needed one most. Let that be recorded in our histories. Let no one forget. More voices joined the agreement. Warriors who'd been frozen by the Void Stalker's touch, who'd felt its ancient hunger, who owed their lives to the magic they'd once called cursed. Pax tugged on Lumi's hand. "Mama, does this mean we get to stay? In the place with doors and warm bread and Papa's stories?" Lumi's eyes softened. "Yes, sweetheart, we get to stay." "Good." Pax looked at his father. "Papa, will you teach me to hunt? Mama taught me about ice and stars, but she doesn't know about pack hunts. She said only you could teach me that." Riker's throat tightened. "I would be honored." "And can we have honey cakes after?" "As many as you want." The assembly dissolved into smaller conversations, wolves discussing reconstruction plans, processing the trauma of the attack, adjusting to their new alpha. Lumi moved toward the exit, Pax at her side, but paused when Riker approached. "Thank you," Riker said quietly, "for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "I'm not doing it for you," Lumi said flatly. "I'm doing it for him. He deserves a father, a pack, a life that's more than just survival." "I know, but still, thank you." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. The mate bond hummed between them, not painful anymore, but not comfortable either. A constant awareness of each other, of the connection that could never be truly severed. "I'm not asking you to love me again," Riker said. "I'm not even asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for the chance to prove, day by day, that I can be the man I should have been 5 years ago, the man you and Pax deserve." "Words are easy, Riker. It's the actions that matter." "Then watch my actions, for as long as you need." Lumi studied him for a long moment. Then, almost reluctantly, "You were different, during the battle, when you gave up the alpha position, when you chose us." She looked away. "Maybe there's something worth salvaging, maybe, but it's going to take time, a lot of time." "I have time, all the time you need." Pax, who'd been listening with the solemn attention children give to adult conversations they only partially understand, suddenly took both their hands. His small fingers wrapped around Lumi's pale ones and Riker's darker, scarred ones, bridging them. "Mama says family is who keeps you warm when the world is cold," Pax announced. "And the world was very cold in the wastes, but it's warmer here, and even warmer when we're all together." He looked up at them with those wise, ancient eyes in a child's face. "So maybe we could be warm together, all three of us." Lumi and Riker exchanged a glance over their son's head. Not love, not yet, maybe never again in the way it had been before, but something else, something fragile and tentative. Possibility, maybe. The foundation for something that could be built slowly, carefully, day by day. Understanding that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven easily. That trauma didn't vanish because someone fought beside you once. That earning trust was measured in years, not moments. But also understanding that some bonds, once forged, could never be completely broken. That family was more than blood. It was choice, renewed every day. That strength meant admitting when you were wrong and working to be better, even when forgiveness wasn't guaranteed. "Yes," Lumi said softly, squeezing Pax's hand. "We can try to be warm together." They walked out of the great hall like that, Pax between them, holding both their hands, a bridge between past and future. Behind them, the pack watched their former alpha and his ghost wolf mate with a mixture of emotions: judgment, sympathy, hope, skepticism. But mostly hope. The Northern Territories would rebuild. Marcus would lead them into a new era. The Void Stalker was sealed for another 1,000 years. And somewhere in the middle of all that recovery and reconstruction, a broken family would try to heal. Not instantly, not easily, but day by day, moment by moment, earning trust and rebuilding what had been destroyed. Outside, snow had begun to fall, clean, white, peaceful. Pax tilted his face up to catch flakes on his tongue, laughing with pure childish joy. Lumi watched him with fierce love, her hand steady in his. And Riker watched them both, his mate who didn't trust him, his son who barely knew him, and made a silent vow. He'd spent however long it took proving he'd changed, proving that the man who chose family over power was real. Some stories didn't end with happily ever after. Some ended with the possibility of happiness, earned slowly through changed actions and persistent effort. Some ended with the understanding that redemption wasn't a moment. It was a lifetime of small choices, made correctly, day after day. Pax looked up at his parents, snow catching in his white hair. "Can we go inside? I'm hungry, and Mama promised to tell me more stories about the stars." "Of course, sweetheart," Lumi said. "Can Papa come too? He knows different stories, about wolves and packs and how families run together under the moon." Lumi hesitated, then meeting Riker's eyes. "Yes, Papa can come too." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start was enough. Some betrayals cannot be forgiven easily, but some bonds are strong enough to survive even the coldest winter. This is not a story of instant redemption. It's a story of a man learning that strength means admitting you were wrong, and a woman learning that survival is not the same as living. Together, with their extraordinary son, they'll discover what it truly means to be a pack. Thank you for reading this story of redemption, sacrifice, and second chances. If you enjoyed following Riker, Lumi, and Pax's journey from betrayal to fragile hope, please consider subscribing for more emotionally powerful stories that explore the complexities of love, family, and what it truly means to choose the people who matter most. Some bonds can't be easily broken. Some mistakes can't be quickly forgiven. But some families are worth fighting for, even when the path forward is measured in small steps rather than grand gestures. Subscribe to never miss a story where characters face impossible choices, earn their redemptions one day at a time, and discover that true strength lies not in power, but in protecting those you love. See you in the next story.